Have you ever wondered how your beliefs shape your reality? Welcome to the Personal Evolution Podcast. Join our hosts, John and Lisa, as they explore self-improvement, positive psychology, and the power of mindset. Subscribe now and activate notifications to dive into transformative discussions that empower your personal growth.
Hello and a huge welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive.
Hello. Great to be here.
We are honestly still buzzing.
Yeah.
We recently got to attend a presentation by the cellular biologist Bruce Lipton.
Oh, it was incredible. Really something.
Just wow. It wasn't just, an interesting talk. It felt like one of those moments that really makes you rethink things.
Absolutely. Kind of recalibrates your whole understanding, especially in life sciences. And the way he presented these huge ideas.
With such solid scientific backing. That's what really hit me.
Exactly. Rigorous. It wasn't just speculation.
No, not at all. He was meticulously laying out the evidence, step by step. It felt like a real masterclass in how science can lead to genuinely revolutionary thinking.
And you have to remember where he came from, right? He taught conventional genetic theory for years at university.
Right. He wasn't just some outsider.
No, this shift in his understanding came directly from his own research.
Yeah.
Decades of it in cellular biology.
That journey, from the established dogma to these, groundbreaking insights, that makes it so compelling.
Definitely. He even mentioned his early stem cell work stuff from decades ago.
Yeah, that was foundational, wasn't it? For a lot of what he talks about now.
Completely. It just shows how his perspective was built piece by piece through careful scientific work.
And the courage it must have taken.
Oh, for sure.
Well,
to challenge the prevailing views based on what his own experiments were showing him.
He just followed the evidence, even when it, questioned everything they thought they knew about cells.
Exactly. So, okay, let's dive into that, because that's what this is all about, right?
Yes. Let's explore these fascinating scientific insights from Lipton. Really unpack the evidence behind his view on cellular biology.
Sounds good. He really stressed that his ideas are rooted in scientific principles. It's about understanding the actual mechanisms governing our biology and our potential.
Okay, so he kicked off by tackling that core belief most of us have, that DNA is king, the master controller.
Yeah, the blueprint that dictates everything. He gave some useful history there, reminding us how discovering DNA structure back then was huge.
Led straight to that idea of genetic determinism.
Pretty much. The idea that your genes basically predetermine your traits, your health, maybe even how you act.
And he made a point of highlighting Rosalind Franklin's contribution, too.
Yes, very important to acknowledge her role. Absolutely crucial.
But back to the main point. Lipton really challenged that whole idea of genes being self-activating, like they're inherently in charge.
He even brought up that old Life magazine cover, didn't he?
Were you born that way?
Yeah.
It perfectly captured that pervasive belief.
And then he asked those really basic questions. Did you choose your genes? Can you change them if you don't like them?
Which, of course, leads to feeling like a victim, right? If heart disease runs in your family, well, tough luck.
That feeling of being tracked by your inheritance.
But he argued, based on science, that that's just not the complete picture. Not even close.
He mentioned how even major institutions like the NIH sometimes casually call the nucleus, where the genes are the brain of the cell.
Right. And this is where his own early research comes in. The experiments where he actually removed the nucleus.
Nucleation, yeah. He took the nucleus out of cells.
And the cells kept going. They functioned. For a while, anyway.
Which directly contradicts the idea that the nucleus, the genes, are the sole command center.
So that's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
If the cell works without the nucleus, what is controlling it?
Well, his central argument, backed by that research, is that genes aren't the controllers. They're blueprints. That's the better description.
The clueless, okay, like plans.
Exactly. He used that analogy of a TV set getting a broadcast signal. The gene is like the pattern in the broadcast signal, but it's the environmental signals, the dials on the TV, let's say, that actually determine how that pattern shows up on the screen. The environment controls the expression.
Okay, that makes sense. And the implications for how we see illness are huge then.
Absolutely. Think about the common idea that a specific gene causes cancer.
Right, like the BRCA gene.
He was very clear. There isn't a gene that causes cancer. Yes, some genes, like BRCA, might mean a higher predisposition, a correlation.
But correlation isn't causation. Basic science principle.
Exactly. Having the gene doesn't automatically mean you will get the disease. That's a critical distinction.
He did acknowledge, though, that a tiny fraction of diseases, less than 1%, he said, do have a direct link to a single gene. Like cystic fibrosis, maybe?
Things like that, yes. Very rare. But the vast majority, over 99%.
They're linked to lifestyle and environment. That's a massive number.
It really is. And that's actually quite empowering, isn't it? Because lifestyle, environment, those are things we often have some control over.
It shifts the whole narrative. Instead of just genetic bad luck, our choices and surroundings become major players in our health.
And he proved this scientifically with those stem cell experiments he mentioned earlier.
Yes. Tell us about those again.
He took one stem cell, let it divide so he had genetically identical cells. Clones, essentially.
Okay, same genes in all of them.
Exactly. Then he put these identical cells into different environments, different culture mediums in petri dishes.
And what happened?
Well, in one environment, the cells developed into muscle, in another, bone, and a third, fat cells.
Wow. From the same starting genes.
Precisely. The environment determined their fate, not just the genes themselves. It was a controlled experiment, clear results.
So that was a key moment for him, wasn't it? Seeing the environment actively telling the genes what to do.
That was the pivotal observation. It led him straight into the field we now call epigenetics.
Epigenetics, which literally means above genetics, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
It's the actual scientific study of how environmental signals control gene activity without changing the underlying DNA sequence itself.
So the DNA code stays the same, but whether a gene gets read or ignored changes based on the environment.
That's the core idea. And what's fascinating is that his early cell research where he saw this happening actually predated epigenetics becoming a formally recognized field. He was seeing it in action in his lab.
He had a great analogy for how it works. Something about a chromosome.
Yeah, the DNA core and the protein sleeve around it. Think of the gene for blue eyes being on that DNA core.
Okay.
But it can't be read, can't be expressed unless that protein sleeve covering it is removed.
And what removes the sleeve?
An environmental signal. Some signal from outside the gene has to trigger the removal of the sleeve. The gene itself doesn't just switch on, it needs that external cue. It's a mechanism you can actually observe.
That completely flips the old model, the primacy of DNA
Yes,
idea.
that old model was DNA to RNA to protein, a one-way street.
But epigenetics shows the environment is regulating which genes even get onto that street in the first place. Adds a whole new layer.
A critical layer of regulation, yes.
He also brought up the Human Genome Project. Remember the surprise when they found out humans have roughly the same number of genes as, what, worms?
Right. Around 20,000 genes, not the 100,000 plus they expected. It really showed that gene count alone doesn't explain complexity.
So where does the complexity come from?
That's where epigenetics and understanding the rest of the genome comes in. The non-coding DNA, the protein modifications, he called them dials.
The dials that fine-tune gene expression.
Exactly. Epigenetics allows for incredible flexibility. It can essentially edit how a gene is read, leading to potentially thousands of different protein variations from just one gene blueprint.
Over 3,000, he said.
It's astounding. That's a scientifically supported mechanism for generating biological complexity.
So here's a key point then. Even if you have perfectly healthy gene blueprints, a negative environmental signal, and that includes your internal environment, like thoughts and beliefs, could cause that gene to produce a faulty or non-functional protein.
Which could then contribute to disease, yes. It highlights how crucial both our external world and our internal state are, right down to the cellular level.
It also explains things like identical twins, right? Same genes, but
Often very different health outcomes or lifespans, because their life experiences differ, their environments differ, leading to different epigenetic markers accumulating over time. Their shared genes get expressed differently. That's well-documented science.
he shared some really compelling research too, like Dean Ornish's work.
Oh, yes, the prostate cancer study. Fascinating.
Showed that major lifestyle changes, diet, stress reduction, social support, the whole package could actually change the function of around 500 genes.
In just 90 days, that's demonstrating the power of conscious lifestyle choices impacting genetic expression, tangible changes.
And studies on meditators too, showing changes in inflammation-related genes.
After just, 8 hours of practice in some studies, measurable biological shifts linked to internal states and conscious practice, again, is tangible evidence.
So the big takeaway here, scientifically speaking, is that our genes aren't some fixed destiny we're stuck with.
Not at all. We have way more influence over how our genes are expressed than the old model suggested. It's all about that interplay of genes and environment.
Okay, then he shifted gears a bit, didn't he? Towards physics.
Right. He brought in quantum physics to explain the mechanism of environmental control more deeply.
He started with the classical view, Newtonian physics. Matter and energy are separate.
Yeah, the old billiard ball model of the universe. Energy over here, physical stuff over here, and energy doesn't really affect matter directly.
Which is why traditional medicine often focuses on physical things, like drugs, to change biology. Material interventions for a material body.
Exactly. But quantum physics, which is arguably our most tested and validated scientific theory,
Paints a very different picture of reality, doesn't it?
fundamentally different. It shows that the universe, at its base, is energy. What we perceive as solid matter is just, well, condensed energy, an energetic phenomenon.
Subatomic particles aren't solid little balls. They're like vortices of energy.
That's a good way to put it. Dynamic energy fields. So interactions at that level aren't physical collisions. They're interplay between energy waves. That's core quantum mechanics.
And this energy field is everywhere, containing all sorts of frequencies, radio waves, sunlight. And we are part of that. We're energy beings radiating and interacting with it constantly.
Which is entirely consistent with how we understand biology at the molecular and atomic level, too. It all fits.
So this leads to a huge consideration. Consciousness.
Yes, because quantum physics strongly suggests through experiments, not just theory, that the observer, consciousness, plays a role in shaping reality at that quantum level.
Change the consciousness, influence the structure. Is that the idea?
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
He quoted Max Planck, one of the founders of quantum theory.
Oh, right. All matter originates only by virtue of a force. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. Pretty profound from a physicist.
And Planck wasn't alone. Other major physicists, like Sir James Jeans, Arthur Eddington, they echoed similar ideas, the universe being more like a great thought than a great machine, mind as fundamental.
These weren't fringe figures, they were leaders in physics.
Exactly. And Lipton even pointed to a conclusion published in the journal Nature, suggesting the universe is immaterial, mental, spiritual. That indicates a kind of convergence of thinking.
Wow. So from this scientific viewpoint, we're not just passive observers in a machine.
No, we're active participants, shaping reality through our consciousness. So if you find yourself constantly getting results you don't want in life,
It becomes scientifically valid to look at your own conscious and subconscious patterns. What signals are you sending out?
precisely. He then tied this back to the cell biology. Proteins are the machinery doing the work in the cell, but their activity is triggered by signals from the environment. Now, the old Newtonian way was to try and tweak that machinery with material drugs.
But the quantum view suggests energy and information are the primary signals.
That's the implication. Energy signals, like thoughts and beliefs, might be more fundamental controllers than chemical ones.
Which naturally brings up questions about relying solely on pharmaceuticals, doesn't it? Their side effects.
He did reference some statistics on that, the potential downsides and risks associated with prescription drugs, how conventional medicine itself is sometimes ranked as a cause of mortality. These are serious public health points based on available data, worth evaluating scientifically.
You then talked about the cell membrane again. The receptors on the surface, like antennas.
Exactly. Biological antennas tuned to pick up environmental signals. Those signals then cause the receptors to change shape, triggering responses inside the cell. It's like flipping switches. That's basic cell signaling.
Those switches control the cell's behavior. It's biology.
Right. And he used that analogy again, the cell membrane being like a crystal semiconductor with gates and channels.
Like a computer chip.
Exactly like an organic computer chip, processing information from the environment. And the nucleus with the genes, that's like the hard drive containing the programs or data.
So these switches, these receptor proteins,
Yeah.
they're basically the physical interface for our perception, our awareness of the environment.
Yes. They translate environmental signals into cellular action. So our beliefs, which are essentially our collection of perceptions about the world,
Directly influence which switches get flipped in our cells.
Yeah.
That's the mind-body connection made tangible.
Absolutely. That's where the power of belief comes right into focus. If you can change your core beliefs,
You change the signals your cells receive.
and that changes cell function, which ultimately changes your health, your experience of life, it points to this potential for conscious self-regulation right down to the biological level.
So where do these powerful beliefs even come from? He talked about that too.
She did. He used that image of us being like skin-covered petri dishes.
Yeah, with our blood as the culture medium.
And the composition of that culture medium, our blood, is influenced by signals from our external environment, but also crucially by our internal perceptions, our thoughts. Those signals bathe our cells.
And the mind is the interpreter, right? The filter.
The central interpreter. Two people can be in the exact same situation,
But have totally different biological responses based on how their mind interprets it, which is shaped by their past experiences, their existing beliefs.
Exactly. It shows how subjective our biological reality can be.
And the mind's main job, he suggested, is to create coherence, to make reality match our beliefs.
Yeah. If you subconsciously believe something won't work out, your mind will subtly guide your perceptions and actions to make that happen. Self-fulfilling prophecy, essentially.
Which works for positive thoughts too, presumably.
Absolutely. Positive or negative, conscious or subconscious, our beliefs shape our biology and our lives. Key mind-body insight.
Okay, so the origin of these foundational beliefs, the subconscious mind, especially early childhood.
That's what he emphasized, the first 7 years specifically. Our brains are mostly in that theta brainwave state then.
Which is like hypnosis,
Well,
very
it's
receptive.
Highly receptive. Like a sponge absorbing information, behaviors, beliefs from parents, family, culture, without the conscious mind filtering or judging yet. This is pretty well-established neuroscience.
So we download these programs, these fundamental beliefs, before we even have conscious awareness, really.
And they become deeply ingrained, running automatically in the background for most of our lives.
And the kicker is, a lot of those programs might be limiting or self-sabotaging, things we wouldn't consciously choose as adults.
Exactly. And the subconscious is estimated to be running the show, 95% of the time? Whenever our conscious mind isn't actively focused and directing things.
Wow, 95%, that's huge.
It explains why we often repeat patterns or struggle to change habits, even when we consciously want to. We're running on old programming, like his example of Bill unconsciously acting like his father.
Right, operating on software we didn't even install ourselves.
But, and this is the really hopeful part, grounded in neuroplasticity, those programs can be changed. We're not stuck.
Okay, how? What did he suggest?
He outlined a few evidence-based ways. Using that receptive state just before sleep, like self-hypnosis, feeding positive affirmations directly to the subconscious.
Repetition was another one, right? Consciously practicing new behaviors until they become automatic, forming new neural pathways, creating new habits.
Yes, consistent practice. And then he mentioned various energy psychology techniques, things that can supposedly facilitate rapid belief change at the subconscious level.
So there are practical methods, leveraging how the brain learns to intentionally rewrite those old scripts.
Exactly. Installing new, more empowering beliefs and habits. It offers real pathways for personal change.
Then he ended with something really
Yeah.
profound about life and death.
Yeah, moving beyond just the cellular biology to the bigger picture, he proposed that fundamentally we're spiritual beings, energy fields, not just physical bodies.
Our core essence isn't confined to the physical.
That's the idea. It connects science back to a lot of ancient wisdom, actually. He sees the body as more like a receiver.
Like a TV set again?
Kind of. Tuned to a specific frequency, your individual identity broadcast from the larger energy field.
So in the body, the receiver stops working.
The broadcast, the consciousness, doesn't necessarily end. It just needs another receiver, potentially. A different perspective on continuity of consciousness.
And the point of having the body in the first place.
To experience, to feel the richness of the physical world. Taste, touch, emotion, love. The body is the vehicle for the spirit's experience. It also brings in that idea of interconnectedness. Our thoughts, our energy radiate out and affect the field, affecting others. Collective consciousness implications.
So, wrapping it all up,
Yeah.
the implications of Lipton's message, backed by the science he presents, are just huge.
Immense. The power of belief is real, it's biological.
The environment, including our internal one, has massive sway over our genes, way more than we thought.
Consciousness isn't just a byproduct, it's fundamental. It shapes reality.
And ultimately, it points to this incredible potential for personal empowerment, for change, that resides within each of us.
And again, this isn't just wishful thinking. It's increasingly grounded in solid scientific principles, epigenetics, quantum physics.
Fields that are rigorously studied and tested.
Exactly. It's a perspective anchored in scientific observation and inquiry.
It really leaves you with a big question, doesn't it? This whole deep dive into Lipton science.
What's that?
Just the possibility that our whole understanding of life, of health, of what we're capable of, might be far more flexible, far more adaptable, and far more under our own influence than we've ever been led to believe.
It certainly challenges us, doesn't it? To look beyond the limitations we might have unconsciously accepted and to really explore the power within our own awareness and our choices.
Well, that feels like a good place to pause for this deep dive. We really hope you found these scientific ideas as fascinating and, well, empowering as we did. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, it's been fantastic exploring all this with you. We'll look forward to the next deep dive together. Goodbye for now. Thank you for joining us on the Personal Evolution Podcast. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's discussion. Leave us a comment with your insights. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and share to keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep evolving.